that I'm getting too busy or that I'm just really bad at managing my time?
I don't know that it's that you're bad at managing your time or that you're too busy. I think it's because we're getting into a cycle, like a rhythm of it. So it can feel overwhelming because it's like, okay, I got to do this. 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 And it all starts over. I got to do this. I got to do this. Got to do this. Got to do this. So
it is a really weird rhythm. It is a really weird rhythm of weeks, though. You're right. I have noticed that. It's like every week is just this like weird rotation now.
Yeah. And I think once we get to a spot to where we can have like a chill weekend where we're not working on a project or something, then you'll feel refreshed.
Yeah, but that's going to be a long time.
At least another week.
Probably like 18 years. Anyways, my name is Justin.
And I'm LaBre.
And this is the Better Together podcast. I've got to be honest, that went a lot better for me than I expected it to. I was ready to be like really constructive, but I'm glad that it almost sounds like you kind of feel the same thing. So that's really good to hear. And you are right. We've not really had a chill weekend because it's been either meetings at church. This last weekend, we've been working on the new studio, which obviously this podcast, well, I guess not obviously because you could be listening to the audio only version, but this podcast does not have a video with it. We've been kind of slacking off on being able to put the video parts of this out. And that's because it's very difficult to drag everything out and set it up. And so we've decided to dedicate an actual studio space in the house in a place where things can just stay pretty much set up all the time.
Maybe adjust a light here and there type situation, but it's going to make it a lot easier to just go sit down, plug your microphone in and go. Well, my microphone in because it's not all the way always plugged in.
Yeah, yours is kind of the one that gets moved around a little bit more. And some stuff may have to slide, but I'm kind of wanting to basically wheels. Wheels are going to be a big part of the studio. And if you watch the vlog channel or if you subscribe to our vlog channel, The Family Life on YouTube, don't try searching it because it doesn't come up. We're not good enough for that. We don't have the SEO or the page ranking yet.
Just find the link in the description.
The link is in the description for that YouTube channel where you can see this. And eventually we will have the updated tour of the studio space, the office space, the secret place. That's my other kind of idea about that is like a place where I can go pray and study and be alone with God. And I'm just too big for a closet.
Yeah.
So, yes and no. But, no, but we've just been a lot more busy than normal. And it's coming down to the fact that we want to do so much in service to God.
Yes.
What I'm realizing is I have more that I want to do than I honestly have time to do.
Yeah.
Because I want to be involved in every facet of online ministry, as well as be involved in, real in-person ministry.
Yeah.
But I want to be doing more social media content, and I want to be putting out more videos, and I love doing the podcast, even though we had to kind of cancel one of the podcasts.
Yeah.
That really helped me, I think, get better at podcasting. Doing 3 for so long, I think I got up to like 60 episodes in, 20 weeks or something like that, from where we were doing 3 a week.
Yeah.
And so I can't remember exactly where we ended what, but we really crunched through a bunch of podcasts and just got better at talking and communicating. At least I did.
The more you do it, the better you'll get.
Yeah.
Practice doesn't make perfect. It makes improvement.
Well, I mean, it does make perfect and eventually.
Yeah.
But I would not say we're at perfect yet.
Yeah.
20,000 hours to be great at something. Is that what they say? Like you had to play guitar for that long before you're great at it. But I don't know. There's so much I want to do that it can feel overwhelming and like I'm not doing enough or as much as I want to do. And I personally kind of feel like I don't manage my time as good as I need to. But I think it comes down to like balancing work with rest.
Yes. And in that, it's balancing work, like your 9-to-5 job, with your home life versus balancing that with the ministry as well.
Yeah.
Because there has to be a balance between the 3 of those because you do have to work outside of the house and go and provide a living for us.
Yeah. I do think about that. Like if this ever if ministry work and not just like the idea of one day pastoring a church and things like that, but even if like the online ministry stuff could ever become full-time, we're hitting another level.
Yeah.
Like the amount of stuff that could be put out or if you just had more people involved in the the not front side of things.
Yeah.
If we were able to do more, have more people involved in the back of house and the posting and editing and the creative side of things. Like if I could just sit down and talk about God, or if I could just sit down and like write about God and like somebody else is going to break this up into posts or whatever.
Yeah.
We're going to be golden.
Yeah.
You know, but we're not at that place right now. It's like you don't obviously you don't have the time to do all those things. And then like there's that creative thing where it's like I still struggle with wanting some control over the things because I want it to look a certain way or be a certain way. And so it just feels like overwhelming. What I was thinking today, though, that was interesting, is I was listening to a podcast, and they didn't bring it up in this manner, but I was thinking, like, that's pretty interesting. And they were talking about when Peter stepped out of the boat to walk towards Jesus on the water, and then he started to look around, and he started to drown. And I kind of wondered how that equates to when we're serving God in the ministry, right? Because obviously God's calling us.
Yeah.
But he did call out to the people, and then he did say, come to me, when Peter asked if he could. A lot of times when we serve God, God is calling us, but we're all also asking God, how can I serve you? What can I do for you? How can I fulfill the ministry that you're giving me? And things like that. And then God answers. He calls us out onto the storm. He calls us out into this busyness. There's so much we want to do. But if we get our focus off God, that's when it seems overwhelming. When we try to do it on our own.
Yeah.
Because when Peter began to sink, it's because he took his eyes off Jesus and began to look around, and he was kind of trying to walk on his own instead of trusting in the Lord to help him walk. And I wonder if that's also part of the reason that we can sometimes become overwhelmed, is because we get more caught up in the work than who we're doing the work for, and allowing God to lead and guide in those things. Because I'll be honest, like a lot of this podcast is easy.
Yeah.
Easy peasy. You know, this is something that we can come and do, and it's not a big deal. But the other podcast episodes is basically just like a sermon every week. Is the only way that I could equate it. I'm studying, I'm finding something, and I'm writing notes. And there's a lot of weeks where I'm like, God, I just don't know.
Yeah.
You know, like you can search your Bible for a message to preach, and you're never going to find it. But the moment you just let go and you just get with God, that's when God's like, here you go.
Yeah.
You know, so it's interesting. And then we try to do the vlog now. And I'm struggling with that because like the last video I did, well, not the last video, I just finished editing a video today that's about the church plant. We're going to get talking about that in a second. And the Bible study that we've started. But I did that one, and that was kind of vloggy. But then I've not been the best about vlogging, and I really need to figure out what direction I want to go with that channel, because I have an idea for a video that would actually need to be recorded tomorrow, talking about just like valuing the church and how do you value the church, and just like make a video like that. But I'm like, is that really what I want to do on this channel or not? And so maybe we can get into that later, because I'm not sure anybody wants to hear us discuss like the philosophy of our YouTube channel. But like the video before that was more vloggy, but it was still just like talking about the frustrations of making videos. So I don't really know where I want to fall on that.
Yeah, it's a hard line to be at, but like you said, we can discuss that later and save them from all of that.
I will say you can dictate some of that in the video channel. Are you more interested in just life, or are you more interested in kind of like a little bit of teaching done around life?
Yeah.
So like living life but teaching, or just seeing the life of people who are making podcasts, making videos, who are trying to do all they can to serve God and just live a normal family life. What's the line?
Yeah.
Where do we need to fall on that?
What do you guys want to see? We want to know.
Yeah. What would you watch?
Yeah. That's the real question. Because if you're not going to watch it,
then we don't want to make it.
Exactly.
Well, that's iffy. But that's what we're going for.
Yeah.
But there's just so much. And then now, like you were saying about like the week rotation thing, you know, like Monday, Tuesday, podcast days.
Yeah.
And then Wednesday's church. Thursday's the new Bible study. Friday, we see my parents. Saturday is normally project day. And then Sunday, obviously, is church again. And we do 2 church services on Sunday. So it's a busy week. And it just feels like it's just like a click over every single week of restarting.
I think once we kind of get the studio space set up, we'll be able to have a little mini break.
Yeah.
And get a little bit of rest, because it is like a constant go, 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 go. And that does become tiring and overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I think kind of pushing through and getting to that spot is going to be good for us.
And the reason I want to talk about this isn't like, oh, woe is us or anything like that. It's like, I don't want to burn out.
Yeah.
And I want to keep doing the things that we're doing. I want to keep making this podcast. I want to keep making the other podcasts. I want to keep putting things out there because I see the impact that it's having.
Yeah.
I can see the way that these things are getting out there like I would hope they would. We've inspired people on the Daniel fast, and we didn't even get that many views on it.
Yeah.
But there were still people who watched it and were like, I'm going to try this or I'm going to do that. And then there's been things on social media where people have been like, I've never thought about that verse that way or this or that. And we've been able to say so much. And then obviously the podcasts have only helped me in my preaching ministry, just getting comfortable speaking on a microphone, on wearing headphones and hearing your own voice repeated back in your head, which is a trip. And I still think it's going to mess me up on different platforms depending on how the speakers are set up in churches.
You may be pulling that. Can I have less monitor? Can I have more monitor?
Can you just turn this off? You get some earplugs. But I don't know. It's just one of those things of like, I don't want to lose out anything I have. So I want to figure out what am I doing to make it, or what can I do to make it work better? And where should we be at, especially with like the Bible study, which was the first one was last week.
Yes. It was so great.
You get this like squinty eye thing whenever you get like all
super
like
excited.
That. Yeah. But
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a wonderful Bible study last week. We had 2 people show up that were both very hungry for God and for learning about his word and exactly what it says and all of that. We had a wonderful time of fellowship with them afterwards even. Like, I'm talking, we had Bible study start at 7. We had people show up before 7, and we didn't leave. We didn't get home till almost 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So that's a long time of being out. So I'm so thrilled with the relationships that we built in that. Yes, it was just 2 people, but oh my goodness, those 2 people are so hungry for God. Once like we get through this, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I was kind of letting you just go because I want to hear your thoughts on it, because I shared a lot of my thoughts in the video and I actually just listened to a lot of my own thoughts as I edited that video just a little while ago. But so it was a great time. And even like, and I think that's been the other half of this is I'm trying to think about how many weeks now that these different things have been going on. But for the last several weeks, because of all these different ministry things, we've been getting home later than we're used to. And so then there's that other half of just like being tired, like a lack of sleep and things like that. I thought this was when you were young, you were supposed to not be that way, but it's apparently not working.
Well, see, the thing is we're really old at heart.
Yeah.
So like we've trained ourselves to get a very nice night's rest. Like we're in bed early 90% of the week usually. And we wake up early.
See, but I'm ready to get to being in that point of being an old person where like
you don't need sleep.
You don't need sleep anymore. I want to be that level. I want to be able to like go to bed at midnight, wake up at 5, and you just live your life and your day. Maybe you take a nap. That's cool, you know.
I mean, maybe we'll get there eventually. We'll see. But right now we're in the little bit of the struggle of we've had several late nights, like pretty consistently for the last little bit, and had days where our toddler has had to skip nap for various things. So like his sleep's a little wonky and it's just been a mess. So we're all tired.
Yeah, definitely. But it's all worth it in the end. And that's the big thing. And like you mentioned, the Bible study being small in the video, I talk about that because it is kind of like, oh, you want it to be big and you want it to be grand. But at the same time, if it was, you wouldn't get that dose of humility that I think that we sometimes need to not become prideful. Like if we had had 30 people there, we'd be like, we're the best ever. Look what God is doing just for us. And, you know, blah, blah. And then you'd start like, I think it almost would have caused issues. And then the other half of it is that the Bible talks about like God finds joy in small beginnings. And so like we start small like this, but that doesn't mean it's going to stay small.
Yeah.
It has the opportunity to grow.
Well, I really enjoyed it being smaller for the first one because we really got to connect with those 2 people that were there. If, 30 people did show up on that first time, you wouldn't really get to connect with them like we did.
With anybody. That's a good point.
Yeah, like we did before. So like if this week we have more people show up, we already have established relationships with the ones. So we can work on others. We can continue to foster those, but we don't have to be so much into that. We can bring them into the other and foster a relationship between all of us. So I'm super excited. God's doing great things.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty amazing. And talking about God doing great things, it really gets into like the idea of how we got to this point.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if we've really talked about it on this podcast a whole lot about like our calling, and like obviously we talked about the calling of like I'm become a licensed minister in the last year, and we feel called to reach the city that we live in. But then like, how did we discern that call? How did we get to this place?
Yeah,
is not something that we've talked a whole lot about.
Yeah.
You just want me to go on it?
Well, yeah, I'm just gonna let you lead the way.
I'm just giving you some options.
As the spiritual leader of our house, I was going to let you.
Oh, yeah. That's the golden excuse that wives have. But, well, sometimes I feel like I talk too much on the podcast.
Hey, I chime in when I need to, and I take over when I need to, so all's well.
Well, what it really comes down to is that, first of all, shortly after we got married and I had been in the church, has like time to think about like when you're doing a podcast like this, how far do you go back?
Yeah.
So let's just go all the way back.
Okay.
It was it wasn't cool at all. No. It was a hot day in August in 1994. No, but I was born to a family that does believe in God, that does have faith, but we weren't the biggest church going family. Like we went to churches on and off and things like that. A little bit more off than on, sadly. And so I didn't grow up in the youth group type scene, and I didn't grow up in these different things, but I grew up knowing who God was and saying prayers before bed and things like that. And so like I always thought that I knew God and things. And then at one point, it was a weird thing. It was like, I think I was in college, and that movie God's Not Dead came out. This is a super weird story, and I'm sure I've told you this before, whether you remember it or not.
Yeah.
But so that movie came out, and my parents watched it, and then they were like, you need to watch this movie. Because they consider themselves very faith-filled people, and they are very good people, but they don't go to church a whole lot. They don't really read their Bibles, but they consider themselves to be faithful. And so they see that movie, and they're like, this is great. We want this to inspire, our kids. And so they tell me to watch it. Then I do. And so I watched that whole movie, and I'm like, wow, this is really impactful. Like, honestly, like, as cheesy as that movie is, it also is very impactful in the moment and in the time that it was produced. And so I'm watching that movie. I'm like, you're kind of like getting hit in the heart. And at the end, they have you like, they tell you like, get your phone out and text, this many people that God's not dead or whatever. I think it's Willie Robertson tells you to text all these people. And so like, I didn't do that. But so I just watched that. And then the credits are literally on the screen and my phone rings. And it's one of my friends. He's like, hey, I just want to see if you want to go to church on Sunday. And I'm like, well, this is going to be weird, but I literally just watched the movie God's Not Dead, which got me thinking about stuff, and the credits are on right now while I'm talking to you. And that's no joke. Like, I'm dead serious. That's what happened. And so obviously I went to church that Sunday because it feels like God is really saying something to you when that happens. And up until that point, I hadn't been baptized or anything like that. And so, go to church for a while. Finally, like, you're starting to realize, like, and I knew before, even when we went to other churches, I realized I needed to be baptized, but, like, the idea of doing that was kind of nerve-wracking. The idea of, like, getting up in front of everybody and all that stuff, I was like, I don't know about this. And so, finally, there was the altar call to go get baptized, and I'm standing there, like, honestly shaking. Like, so go up there, making my way to the front, say they want to be baptized. They don't do like our current church does, and like our church will do, where like if you say you want to be baptized, we're putting you in the water.
Yep.
We do not need to leave this any longer than it has been. I understand the desire for certain people to be there for your baptism and things like that, but we have water, we have a change of clothes, and we're going to baptize you. That's the way that I now think is the best way. But long story short, got baptized, was in the church for a while, and I was like, there's got to be more to this. And there was nothing against the church that I was attending or even the denomination of that church, but you read the Bible, you look at the Bible, you're being taught things in the service, and you're like, but we're not seeing these things, we're not doing these things. And so then I meet you at a later job, and, you start just you're like talking about church all the time, and like how great your church is, and like my church is doing this, and we're going to have this song thing, and all these things. And long story short, eventually we end up going to church together.
Yes.
We can go into more details about these things at some point. You
Yeah.
can say what you're going to.
I was just going to say, you invited yourself to church with me after I didn't invite you on Easter.
Yeah, you invited everybody but me,
Mm-hmm.
and I was a little offended. Finally, I just said, I was like, hey, why didn't you invite me to church? You know?
Because I knew you liked me, and I didn't want you to go to church just because you liked me.
Yeah. But anyways, long story short, went to that church and then found something else I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up getting rebaptized. Whole long story. But once all that happened, you know, then like I'm living in the church and not living in a church, but going to church regularly, going to that church, and we're being told like, read your Bible, read your Bible, read your Bible. So you start reading your Bible, and like things start settling in.
Yeah.
You get the Holy Ghost. You start being able to like things make sense because God is helping you.
Yeah.
God lives in
Your
you.
eyes have been opened.
Yes, He helps you to understand Scripture, and so those things are going on. And then like after we got married, you know, continue to like go to church, read the Bible, things like that. And it's not long before like I can't read the Bible without like wanting to write things down or say things and stuff. And so that really evolved into some of the websites that we've had before. First one was thefamilylife.com, which is still up in some form or fashion, but where we would just like, we would try to do 3 articles a week. It was like family, faith, and adventure. And so we'd try to do a family focused article every week, a faith focused article, and an adventure focused article. We did that for a long time, and then it was like, I really just want to focus more on the faith side. And so then we started Everyday Apostolic, and we were doing that website for a very long time, and I was posting 3 articles a week.
All faith-filled, written by you mostly. We did have a few guests go through and everything, but
I wrote like hundreds.
95% of what was posted was yours.
It is a lot.
If not more.
Yeah. I wrote like hundreds of articles on that. And that was just like that way of getting out what God had given me. And I kind of thought like, you know, well, maybe I need to be doing something else, but I just never pursued it.
Yeah.
And then, so finally that goes on for a while. But then once we had our son, like, you know, things get busy, things change, all these things. And so like that kind of slowed down a little bit. And then in the past, like a year, some of that stuff started coming back. You know, like you're reading the Bible again, you're really focused on God, and like some of those calls begin to come up. And so like I'm like, okay, well, you know, I'll start writing again. And then it was like, well, no, you need to do something. Like I felt led to speak the word, right? And I'm like, okay, well then I'll do a podcast. Started doing the podcast, and it's like,
and God's like, no,
there's more that you're supposed to do. You need to do. There's more that I'm calling you to. And it's interesting because I don't feel like it's I don't think God was like, no podcast.
Yeah.
You need to preach. It was like, and
there's more.
Yeah, there's more.
More.
I feel like online ministry, it needs to be a focus, but also the actual preaching. And the reason I feel that preaching was a part of that is because like, if I prayed, God, like, what is it that you have for me? I could see the preach. Like I could, like the word would come to me in more of a sermon form than in anything else.
Yeah.
Like when God would lead me to share something, I could see it as a sermon, and like the way that I would present it is what I could see. And that's like what I felt called to do. And so I could just constantly felt that call, like you need to be preaching, you need to be speaking the word, you need to be sharing the word. And so obviously we're still doing the podcast because I feel like God's keeping us on that path because it's an and situation.
Yes.
And so God led us down this road, but it was a lot of time in prayer and fasting and like, God, what is it that you'd have me to do? And like going back and forth. And God's amazing because like when you're really searching after him and you're trying to figure out what he wants you to do, everything will start to point to what he wants you to do. And that's really what happened. We would click on random preaching videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like the title had nothing to do with it. The thumbnail wouldn't have told you. And then all of a sudden it's this call to go forth and do it. Like, go forth and preach, go forth and reach. Like, look at what these people have done. You need to be doing the same thing. And then like the sermons at church all get really pointed that way. We have guest speakers that come in and they're like, I don't know why I didn't come here to preach this tonight. And then they would lay into this whole thing that struck me right in the heart about the call to preach and the call to reach your city and things like that. Or to reach where you need to be and things. And so it was like all this at one time. And it was because I was praying and searching for God. Now, in the middle of that, I left out an important part of that story, that we were living in a rental house for a long time. And, you know, we decided to try to buy a house. And we tried to buy a house at the worst possible time because of inflation and all those great things that 2020 brought us.
Fun times.
But we wanted to live in the city that the church we attend is in. And
because that made sense, live
and
close to your church.
yeah. And so we found house after house, and we made offer after offer, and we were constantly beat out. And a lot of times, not by much.
Yeah.
You're talking about like $1,000 is what settled the difference between us and other people a solid 90% of the time.
Yeah.
There were a few times where people like blew offers out of the water, but honestly, like we were offering over asking on a lot of houses, and we were getting beat by very small amounts. And so there was a city near us that actually, now that we live here, made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
In the long run. But it was the only city that we ever had an offer accepted.
And like we had several offers accepted in the city. And it was just like, okay, well, this house is okay. I mean, it's not really where I want to be.
Yeah.
But like it's okay, and it's a good price range,
It really came down to
we'll just see what happens.
Like my dad sent us the first house.
Yeah.
I was like, you need to go look. And it was a bigger house than anything that we had looked at. It was like almost 2,000 square feet. It was in a great spot. It had a cool yard. It was 2-story.
Yeah.
A lot of really cool things about it. Turned out to be
sinking
into
the mountain.
But after almost a year, I guess at that point, maybe let's just say like it was 8 months. After like 8 months of looking at houses and making offers and not going anywhere, that was the first offer that we'd had accepted.
Yeah.
And it was in the city that we now live in. And so like we were like, well, since that didn't work out, we're still going to focus on the other city. Yeah. We're going to focus on the city that the church is in. And still like we'd be looking and trying and nothing's like, working.
No,
and so
no.
And then another house would pop up in Lenore City. And so we would go, and we had a couple inspections fail. And the second one probably wasn't bad enough that we shouldn't have done it. But it was just like, we're just going to still leave. And then finally, God forced our hand.
Yes.
A little bit. And that's kind of a joke. God's not going to ever make you do anything that you don't want to do.
But he made it real clear.
He made it. He gave us such a good deal. And so the house that we now live in, first of all, we had toured countless houses, furnished houses, unfurnished houses, everything. And we walk into this house, and our son is 2 years old at the time, very independent, walking around everything by himself.
Yep.
He immediately sits down at the kitchen table like he owns the place.
Yeah.
And then we're like, buddy, and like we're kind of laughing, and you're like, all right, come on, buddy, let's keep looking around. So we go look around the house, and we walk like through the back bedrooms and stuff, and we come back out, and he plops down on the couch. He had not done this in any house that we looked at.
And we looked at a lot
of houses. And this is the first one that he ever just like made himself at home in. And so that wasn't really what sold us, but it's just kind of,
it was a weird thing that's like made us think about this house more.
Yeah.
Because he felt comfortable in it.
And this was the first house that had features that just made it a little bit nicer than the other. It's got like the covered carport that's a part of the house. It's not like a metal carport outside.
Yeah.
It's got a double driveway, so there's actually room for multiple cars. It has a shed. It has a basement. It has this. It has that. It had so many features that all the other houses that we had looked at just didn't have. And so, like, there's him sitting there and stuff like that. And so finally, we're like, okay, I think this is the one. And I can't remember exactly what all happened.
We put an offer in.
Yeah.
And they accepted. And then we had the inspection. And we were like, hey, fix these things. They said no.
Well, no, before that, we made the offer. And then that day, or that night, a tree.
No, that was the second time.
No, that was the first time.
That was the second time.
No, I promise you it was the first time.
Okay.
I remember.
Okay.
And so we made the offer, and that day, a tree fell in the house.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really bad, but it damaged the roof. And so they had to put a new roof on the house, which was a great bonus.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you can't beat that on somebody else's insurance and everything like that. So they put a new roof on the house. And then after that, we have our inspector come out, and there's like a crack on one of the outer walls. And so he's like, you really should have somebody that's a foundation person come look at that. And so we called somebody from like one of the companies that fixes foundations to come out. And he's like, oh, yeah, we can do this, that, and the other, and it'll cost $5,000. And so at the end of the day, we just couldn't come up with a deal.
Yeah.
We couldn't come up with an agreement that worked. And so we were like, all right, then we're out.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to pay to get this fixed and these things, then we're not interested.
Mm-hmm.
And so
It sits on the market for a little while.
a while, and our realtor happens to just be like one of our close friends.
Yes.
And so like we're hanging out with him at somebody's house.
Yeah.
And he's like, maybe we should go back to those people. That house is, or I think he mentioned that house, and we're like, it's still up there. That no, they've not sold it yet. He's like, maybe we should offer them less money. Like, okay. And so we come in at like in a time when everybody's offering over, and we had already offered over.
Yeah.
We came in asking for like $2,000 off their asking price, and
they had already lowered it,
and for them to pay $5,000 to get the foundation repair done, and they agreed.
Look at God!
But it gets
what
better.
He will do,
because it gets better though. Because then before we could close with the mortgage company, so we were planning on having that work done. And what was I don't remember exactly how we were going to get the money or whatever, but like we were going to have the money, we were going to pay to have the work done. They were going to come out and they were going to fix the foundation. And so before we could do that, the guy, the mortgage company was like, hey, you need to have a structural engineer look at this, because just having the company that fixed them isn't good enough. We need to make sure that it's fine.
It's structurally sound and everything.
And so that guy comes out and he's like, yeah, I see what they were saying they were going to do, but you don't need to do that at all.
Yeah.
And we're like, what?
It's totally fine.
He's like, no, this is totally fine. Like, it's moved what it's going to move. I don't think it's ever going to move again. You don't need to do that. And we're like, okay. And so what ends up happening is that they still basically they paid our closing costs. And so they paid our closing costs. We got $2,000 off asking price, and we were set to go.
Yeah.
Equaled out, all done. Bam, boom, finished.
It
just worked out.
Just fell into place.
We had we had something happen to us during the housing boom of like 2021 that didn't happen for, as far as I know, anybody else.
Yeah. Like I have not heard any story any remotely close to this.
Yeah. We saved $7,000 during one of the worst markets. And I think that was God being like, this is where you need to be.
We got here and we fell in love.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, one of the people that we did the Bible study with last night, who's super excited about being able to do this with us and like come to the Bible study and be taught about God's word, is our neighbor.
Yeah.
So if we hadn't bought this house, then we probably would have never been able to reach her.
Exactly.
And so that's a great blessing in itself. But it was like God really pushing us to be in this city. And what you have to remember is that in that time, that was 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago now, I wasn't in ministry.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting to be a preacher. I was running from the idea of being a preacher. So the last thing on my mind was that I needed to get to a city
that needed a church.
That needed a church in our denomination,
needed a truth-filled church.
Yeah, I was trying to think about what the ALJC our ministerial organization doesn't have a church in.
Yeah.
And so, like, that was the last thing from my mind. I wasn't thinking, like, oh, we need to find a city that we can plant a church in. I wasn't thinking about that. I was just thinking we need to find a place that we can live and stop paying rent.
That's a decent drive to work.
Yeah. And then we can have a house that's the size that we need it to be. Things like that. Because the house we were living in before was smaller than this house.
Yes.
It was not even, it was technically a 1-bedroom house that we were able
forced into being a 2-bedroom.
Yeah. That we forced into. That's a good way to put it. And so, and our room was the one that didn't even have a closet.
Yeah.
Because
it wasn't a room.
Because we needed to give our son the actual room.
So we could darken out all the windows and everything and set him up to have a good safe
have
foundation.
A door. That was the issue. He needed to have real doors so we weren't waking him up all the time.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how we ended up in this city. And then shortly thereafter is when God begins to move on our hearts and we realized that this is where we needed to be the whole time because that's what God was calling us to.
Yeah.
God's called us to be in ministry. And there's things about that too that we just recently figured out that all brought us to where we are. And I hope that this is making sense.
I mean, I feel like it is, but I've lived it.
Yeah.
So
The short answer is the way that we knew we were called by God is because of the way that things lined out. God put us in a place that we didn't know we wanted to be. Now we truthfully, like, as far as we know for now, God could change things years down the road. But there's nowhere else we would rather be now that we've lived here. We love this city.
Love it so much.
Things have worked out so well. We're so happy to be where we are, but we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for God leading and guiding us.
Like we were saying, we tried to not be in this city.
Yeah. And then the idea of like, how did you get to where you're going to plant a church? we saw the need for one, and then God was calling me to preach, and it was like, you need to reach people where you're at.
Yep.
And so that's what it really came down to, is that was the calling. That was what we were getting from God. We were praying, we were fasting, we were searching and seeking God out in this. And then that's, like I said, the messages we heard, both the ones from our own church and the pulpit that we see every Sunday, as well as the things that we were watching online, the songs we were finding.
Yeah.
Everything was pointing to this. When we would open our Bibles, when you get that moment and you're like, what should I read? And you just feel like I should read Romans or whatever the books were at the time. Everything that stuck out in those books was about doing your ministry, reaching people, doing the work of God. And we knew that all applied to this city. But that revelation and that discernment came through prayer. It came through seeking after God. You're never going to be able to discern what God has for you to do
if you don't talk to him.
Unless you're talking to God, unless you're seeking that information.
Yeah.
That's like saying, you're never going to be able to find out something unless you're trying to find it out.
Yeah.
And the way that we find things out in the faith and we find out what God has for us is by going to God and asking.
Yeah. You remember those science experiments you would do in school where you had to have like a hypothesis and then actually work through your experiment? That's kind of what you have to do in the spiritual realm as well.
Yeah.
You have to have an idea of, what God's wanting you to do, communicate the word to other people, share it, and then you have to study it out.
Yeah. I think a big thing is we all know what God has for us.
Yeah.
God has a call in your life. So you already have the starting point. Your hypothesis is God has something for me. And then the way that you work it out is by first prayer.
Yep.
God, what is it that you have for me? What do you want me to do? God, where are you trying to lead me? I pray that you would give me revelation, give me understanding, give me the ability to discern what you have for me. If you're praying prayers like that, heartfelt and diligently, God's going to show you what he has for you. God isn't going to keep it a secret. If God has something for you, God's going to show you. I was thinking about this, and I want to talk to the other people we're working with in the church plant, because that's the thing. God also blessed us in the fact that we're not going at this alone.
We have a whole team, basically.
Yeah.
Like we've got, because in the other family, there's musicians,
we have everything we need to start
singers,
a church.
And like we have a lot of the other side, like we have a lot of technical background and we have gear and all this stuff.
Something we didn't realize until recently. It's like we have so much of what it takes to start a church already. Not just in like we own certain things, but we have the abilities, the knowledge, and the skills that it would take to do these things on a small scale. There are people that can do them far better, and that's why we don't serve in those areas of the church. We're not highly skilled at these things, but we know enough to where we could get things rolling and get things off the ground, and we never realized that until we were in the middle of it. But then the people that we're working with, they're also highly skilled in other areas that complement the areas that we're skilled in, and they've been in this before. We have a little bit of like the wise counsel, people who know more than we do about what we're trying to do, and so it's going to work out so well. But what I want to share with them that I was thinking about recently is we have to remember we feel a burden for this city, right? But our burden is God's burden.
Yes.
And that's why it's going to succeed. It's not because we want this.
No, it's
because
God
God wants this. God gave us the burden because it's his burden. He wants to see all people saved. And that's something to remember. This isn't our burden. We're just sharing in the burden of God.
Yeah.
So no matter what it is you're burdened with, you may be burdened with ministries that we don't get involved with. You may be burdened to have homeless ministries, to have ministries for the elderly, to have ministries for, single mothers and trying to help them. I remember I've been to churches before that they have things where like there's one Saturday out of the month they change oil for single moms and things like that. They'll like do maintenance on their cars and stuff. That's a ministry. You could have a burden for that. And it's because God cares for those people and for their needs. The burden you have is just sharing in the burden that God has. And God loves and cares for all people. He wants the best for all people.
Yeah.
That's something we often don't think about, is the fact that our burden is God's burden.
Yeah, it really is. I don't have anywhere to go with that because that was just so powerful.
Wow. Look, now I feel like I'm on one of those with the MoreGodlessmepodcast podcast. That was amazing.
You're welcome.
I like those people, but I can't listen to their podcast anymore. I just can't do it.
It was too much. It was too much.
I know that there's people who listen to this podcast and are like, man, those people, their voices are weird and stuff like that. It's like, you guys are doing a great thing, but I just can't listen to you. And that's okay.
Yeah, it's all
If
right.
somebody thinks that about me, that's fine, because I know I've thought it about others.
It's okay if we're not everyone's cup of tea. Some people like coffee.
This is something I heard a long time ago, and I thought it was funny because we used to listen to the Wally Show a lot. And if you don't know what the Wally Show is, they're a radio station. They were on Way FM. Now I think it's like Hope Nation or something. And they're still doing the show, but it's their morning radio show for that radio station. And so Wally tends to be a little bit of like it's almost like a shock jock for Christian radio. You know, like he can definitely fire up some people.
Yes.
And so one thing that he was told one time that was like, you know, you can't dislike a Christian song because God gave that to them. And like some songs are just, some people say that God gave it to them and, you know, maybe didn't, you know, but like that was what somebody said. And I'm like, just because God called somebody to do something doesn't mean that you have to partake in what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because we're all different. That's why we all have different backgrounds. We're called to reach different people. And so, like, I might not like a podcast, but it may be what someone else needed to touch their life.
Yeah.
And that may be true for our podcast. That may be true for a song. I might not like this song, but it may speak to somebody else in a way that's impactful and meaningful and how God intended it to.
Yeah.
Just because it's Christian doesn't mean that we all have to love and enjoy it. We all have the skip button on whatever internet streaming service you use, and we're all using it.
Listen, God gave us free will and the power of choice, and he gave us preferences in that. Not only, so he made us to be so unique. It's so wonderful how God orchestrates everything, but it's okay that you like the 80s Christian rock, and I don't like it that much. It's okay.
How dare you talk about blood good like that?
Listen, there's some days I can get down with it. Other days I'm like, I need something else. But God made us unique.
But we don't all have to like the same things.
God made us unique.
You just literally said the entire More God Less Me podcast, like synopsis in that one thing though, about free will and the power to choose and make decisions. I don't know if you heard me last night in there speaking or what, but wow. You like, that's why I looked at you weird. It's like you hit the nail on the head.
Am I saying something funny? Like, did I word it weird?
No, that was just like I talked about the power to choose was what the episode was about. And we have the ability to choose God. We have the ability to choose how we live for God. We have the ability to choose, you know, all these things in life. And so that was what that episode was about. So when you hit that one, it was like, whoa, hold on a minute.
Well, I'm glad that I was open to being a vessel to where God can just confirm that is what he had for you to share. That's
the thing that I've always found interesting. And like, I think we're just in the random section of the episode is that like, because when I don't know, it's hard to say. Like when I was in the other churches, I try to listen to Christian podcasts, but it's like hard to find stuff. Yeah. You know, like, because I didn't know many other churches and like that thing. And then there were like the big ones, but I'll be honest, the bigger the church, the less I trust them. And so the less I want to listen to your podcast, you know. But that sounds bad, I know, but like you understand. If you know, you know. But then like getting in this church and then like, you know, hearing about other churches in the apostolic faith and in the movement and things like that. And it's like, okay, I'm going to look up that guy or that pastor, this preacher, or like find that church and listen to their podcast. And so then I got in this rotation where I was listening to like the services from 5 different churches or something. And what's weird is like some of them are what would be UPCI and some are ALJC. We're part of the ALJC, but the UPCI, we have basically the exact same views, just 2 different organizations. And so they're 2 different organizations. But there's this part where you're like, is this almost like Catholicism?
Are they coordinating? Like,
is there like a pope that's sending down the message for the week? Because these things are hitting so similar that I can't understand like how this is possible. Of course it's possible. God is leading people. He's leading our world and our movement in the same direction. But when you just are listening organically to these podcasts and things are hitting on those levels,
it's weird.
It's weird.
It's so weird.
I remember one time for like Easter that like the similarity between the 2 messages between like our youth pastor at our church and like the lead pastor at another church, it was like,
Did you share notes?
And did you talk about it beforehand? You know, and this is like, it's like a church in Tennessee and a church in Louisiana, but we're talking about the same thing. And they did it a different enough to where, you know, that wasn't the case. But there was
it wasn't copied.
It was a theme. in the message that you're like, wow, this is crazy. And it happens a lot.
I know what you're thinking. It was Easter. But a lot of times
it wasn't like that, though.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't
like
a true Easter message.
That would be easy. I understand that one, but it wasn't. It's funny because like a lot of our churches, we don't like walk that like expected path of like, you know, and he rose and it was great and you're now saved. Like we actually still do some depth on Easter.
Yeah, we still get into the Word and actually like go through and have a lesson.
But even our friend that just started the church in another city near us, I remember one of our other friends' wives came and she was like, yeah, you know, I really knew that Joel was in the right vein when he was preaching about this at his service, and his service is at 2:00, and then I came to church tonight, and that's what our pastor was preaching about. And there's no way they like. First of all, and this is gonna sound bad, but like the general superintendent of the organization and the lead pastor of the mother church isn't gonna be like, here, you can preach some of my like.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to take some of your message. They wouldn't have seen each other preach and things like that. So it's just funny when she says that. She's like, the vein was similar. It's like, not that they preached the same thing, but the vein was so close. God reveals things to people at the same time. And so that's sometimes like, you know, sometimes, I mean, I've written for so long, done these podcasts for so long, it feels like, you know, oh, wow, look what God's giving me.
But then you go to church and it's being preached on.
Yeah, that's happened to me several times. Do you have my iPad hacked? But it's also
listening to my podcast?
We feel special and fail to realize that God is probably giving the same revelations that we're receiving to countless other people all around the world at the same time, and people will never meet.
Yes.
So we'll never even know that.
But what's even so much more crazy about it is he's probably sharing that with so many more people than actually share it.
Yeah, that's the sad truth. When God's giving you the message, there's a lot of times that God will give you a message for you, but there's a lot of other times that God's giving you that message not just to benefit yourself, but so you'll share it with others. And that doesn't mean you have to do a podcast or make a YouTube video.
Maybe it just means talking to your neighbor or the lady at the checkout at the store, that kind of thing.
Yeah. If we never look for the opportunity to put our faith out there, then we're never going to find it.
Exactly.
It doesn't just pop up where you're like, oh, that's a perfect opportunity. Like, you have to be paying attention.
You have to be, 1, paying attention, 2, sensitive to God's Spirit and in what He's leading you to do. Like I've said it before, during all of the very first inklings of doing a Bible study, I just had a feeling I shouldn't leave. I should go through some of these shops and maybe ask about locations. Yeah. And that's when the first person was like, hey, I'm actually interested in a Bible study.
Yeah, that's the still small voice.
Yeah. So that comes through prayer, Bible reading, fasting, all of that, and being open to what God has for you.
I heard somebody talking about this week, and it was talking about how like there's so much that God has to get filtered through in your mind in order to like actually speak to you. And so like there's that still small voice, but it's like there's so much other junk that we fill ourselves with that God has to get past to be able to speak to us. All the distractions, all the stuff that doesn't matter, all the self.
Yes.
And God has to get past those things. And that's why it's hard to hear God. But the less of those things that we have and the more of God that we have, the clearer and the easier it's going to be to see the way that God's trying to lead us. And that's the struggle, though. And like I struggle with it too. I've talked about on here like how I'm trying to listen to more God-focused podcasts. But also I'm sure there's countless. The algorithms and things like that are a pain. And we're going to get into why you need to help us with that in a minute. But like a lot of the big podcasts in the Christian space are teaching podcasts, which is great. But we need more Christian entertainment podcasts that are like faith-filled and have a moment like we've had in this podcast of sharing things, but are also just sharing life and sharing truth. Yeah. And so, I don't know. It's just like we need more podcasts like that because it's hard to listen to only preaching or to only this or to only like teaching. There needs to be conversations happening in the Christian space. And so it's easy to fill your mind with the things of God, but there is that piece of you that just like sometimes you want to relax with what you're listening to, and it's hard to find those relaxing Christian podcasts. And it's easy to fall into the relaxed space and out of the Christian space because I do it all the time. And even though like some of the stuff like the Foundation podcast and things like that we talked about, they're hosted by Christians, But then, like, it's easy to fall heavy into those
Yes.
and not into the other stuff.
And in that, like, they may mention God.
That one's a lot less. They may mention, like, reading their Bible or Bible study or things like that. And it's not that they're just not that's not what their whole platform's about. Their whole platform's about disc golf.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to stick to disc golf and, like, in doing that, and that's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
The one that's more that way is, like, the Duck Call Room podcast. Their thing is about, like, just their lives and things. And God is a big part of that, and so that stuff comes up a whole lot more. I don't know. I don't really know where I was going on that.
But it's hard to find the chill, relaxing,
it was about
Christian entertainment.
Filling your mind with God, too. Because it's like, I want to relax and not just be taught at all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I struggle with. And I love to be taught because that's how you get better. It's how you grow. Iron sharpens iron and all those sort of things. But at the same time, it's like, okay, that was a lot of... Because, like, and also, in my line of work, I'm in loud spaces to where I have to wear hearing protection. And praise God for Bluetooth hearing protection. But at that same time, like, it can be a lot to listen just to those, you know, preachy type voices all the time, as good as preaching is.
And in that, like, it can be a lot because not only are you in a loud environment and you're using that to protect your ears and everything, but you're focused and doing, like, manual labor a lot of times, like, hard stuff.
Well, you gotta, like, that's the thing is you want something you can listen to, but also you're okay if you do stop paying attention to it. Because, like, that it's a pain when you're like, oh, wow, this is really good, and then you get distracted by what you're doing. Because I think that's the difference between me and you on podcasts. Somehow you can do it with TV shows, but not a podcast.
And the TV show cannot even be in the same room.
Yeah. But my thing is, like, I listen to the podcast just to have that background noise. And sometimes I'm not even paying attention to what they say. And that's why I can listen to an episode a few times because there's always something I missed.
Well, I think me with the TV show thing, it's because it's a storyline. Like, it's a story, not just a conversation.
I just like conversations. And it's funny because, like, I would...
Maybe because I talk so much.
Well, here's the thing. Like, for one, I can cause people to just talk forever.
Yes.
And that is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
Like, and I know that you're listening to this podcast. You're like, this guy
just talks and talks
he just
and
never
talks.
stops.
I promise
can go
you
both
guys,
ways.
It's the opposite in real life.
But that's the thing. So at work, though, it's different. Because especially now at work, like, this is my space. And so there's, like, the comfort zone. And so, like, it's a lot different than if I went to, like, you know, the mall.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a lot more just quiet and reserved at the mall because this isn't my space. I'm not as comfortable here. But, like, at work, I'll go have long conversations with people. You know, we can go forever, you know, different people. But I can drag that out of people, not even on purpose. Yeah. I said that the other day to a guy. So we call it our shop. But basically, like, we have a big office. And so I have a desk and then somebody else in there has a desk. And I was talking to him and I was like, because we just had somebody come in and talk to us for a long time. And I'm like, I don't understand how I cause people to stand here and talk for so long. But I just, you know, I keep asking questions or just, like, you know, keep the conversation going. A lot of people just, like, that's just what ends the conversation. What's funny is that there's a new guy. I guess he's not that new, but, like, he's just recently moved into the same group that I'm in. And he has now been working with us because we're kind of down a man and we knew that was going to happen. And so he's been working with us more. And our boss comes over. And so the guy that I normally work with is pretty quiet. You know, he's more introverted probably than I am in those new people situations. But he talks to me a lot. And that's not a bad thing. It's just funny.
Comfort.
Yeah.
His comfort space.
But when other people show up, he's gone. But this other guy comes over and our boss used to work with us and he just recently got promoted, and so he's like, you know, you think Nathan here doesn't talk a whole lot, but, like, this guy talks even less than him. He makes Nathan look talkative. But now he's been in our shop not even a week, man, and we're just like like he's starting to open up and come out of that shell. You know, it's just funny to watch that. But I'll have those long form conversations with people, especially at work.
But you know what? That's only going to help us in the ministry.
Oh, yeah. We can get rolling.
Everything falls back to God has uniquely prepared us for this. Well,
that was the thing I was thinking about this week was, like, you know, if like evangelism's a struggle to like
Mm-hmm.
make those new connections and talk to new people and things like that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But man, once we like get a church started and we have a regular building and we're there every week and like I spend time there outside of meetings and like this becomes my space and I'm comfortable with this. Oh, it'll be a different whole thing. It's like this is my thing. I got this. I can definitely thrive in that situation. And I hope to get better in the other situations as well.
It's just going to come with time and in finding those other comfort spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So, because you'll just grow more confident in that. But I do think it's about time we wrap this up.
Yeah. I didn't know you'd been paying attention to the time.
I kind of glance around every now and then just to see where we're at. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you have any more questions about our calling and how we got here, if this was too confusing for you, we need to figure out a different way to say it, please let us know. If you enjoyed this and you're feeling a call yourself, please share with us what that call is. We'd love to hear about it and pray for you in that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that wraps it up. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and check back in on Monday for More God Bless Me.
Good job remembering the weekend part.
Hey, I've been working on that.
Until we talk to you guys again, God bless.
God bless.